So I just wanted to share a few things in the season of graduations. I know we had a couple of big graduations of people in our midst. Want to congratulate Dr. Jamelia Jones in receiving her doctorate. No small feat. And also Christopher McMullen. He got his Bachelor of Science in Business Management. So we just praise God for those huge accomplishments, And I don't want to take away from the fact that people graduated from grade to grade. Some people went from first grade to second grade, kindergarten to first grade. And although we look at getting a degree or getting a diploma as the milestone, let's not forget that each one of those grades is an accomplishment. Each one of those grades means I passed all the tests for that set of responsibilities and assignments I was given. So let's give it up for those that passed from grade to grade. Amen. We don't want to leave them out. So I guess what I wanted to do is encourage everybody that wants to move forward or advance in life, whether they want to go back and get more education or if they want to move into a new job, that, it's never too late. It's never too late to keep moving and keep pressing. And I just want to share with you a couple of my observations of people in the Bible that we can look at as examples of those that have graduated and moved on to another calling in their life. So first I want to start talking about Moses. We all know the story of Moses. He was born enslaved or into an enslaved nation. And then Pharaoh was concerned that the population was getting a little bit too big. And so he wanted to kill all the firstborn or the young Hebrew boys. And his mother hid him for as long as she could until finally she said, you know what, I'm gonna have to give him up in order to save him. So he was picked up by Pharaoh's daughter. And check this out. So he was educated in languages, literature, math, hunting, military strategy, the law. All of this stuff was put into him. And then one day he killed a soldier that was beating a Hebrew slave, and he took off. He had to run. And on the run, he encountered this burning bush. And that's where he received his assignment for his next stage. And just like graduates that get their degrees or their diplomas, they graduate and get an assignment at a new job or a new endeavor for that next stage. And he encountered a burning bush when he received that assignment. Now I'm gonna ask you to remember that, the burning bush, for a second, as I keep going. And then another thing that he did, he used his brother as a spokesperson. So he developed into a leader and to a communicator. And again, we'll go on in a moment. But another person I wanted to highlight was Joseph. Now, Joseph was interesting because he had 3 graduations. He was a dreamer and a visionary, and he was a favored son. Now, check this out. He had a dream about 11 stars, the sun and the moon. And upon having that vision, he started to become hated. As he shared that vision, he became hated and jealous of his brother. He's already a favorite son. Now he has this dream that insinuates that he's going to be lording over them. So they weren't having it. So they eventually sold him, and he moved into his next assignment, which was becoming a personal servant. But then he became the captain. He moved up. And so obviously when he was a part of the Pharaoh's house, he learned things. He learned things. He learned how to be a soldier. He learned how to speak the language. He learned how to run things. But then here comes somebody trying to bring him down. Potiphar's wife said, he won't come. He won't do what I want. So I'm going to accuse him of it anyway. So he gets thrown in jail. So now he's down at the bottom rung. But guess what? He ends up being the leader of all the prisoners. So he moves up again. So once he's become in charge, obviously he has to know the procedures and all of the customs associated with that environment, right? So he does that. Now, remember, he has this gift that God has given him of interpreting dreams. So now he is able to go and interpret one of the Pharaoh's dreams. And what does that do? That elevates him yet again into Pharaoh's house. And now he's, what they call it, the Grand Vizier of the house, where he has the run of everything. And you got to know he speaks the language. He knows how to figure out things. He knows how to appropriate the resources to the different people. He's the person that they come to as the second in command to Pharaoh only. So this allowed him to be in a position, check this out, be in a position to open up, once he reunites with his family, to open up a place for the 12 tribes of Israel to flourish. That was their basis. They had a nice, safe place, a comfortable place, in order to flourish. So in this story, I want you to remember the 11 stars, the sun, and the moon. And the next person I want to talk about is Saul/Paul. Now, he was also well-trained. He studied under Gamaliel, the Pharisee. He was a Roman citizen. He was Greek. But he was a leader of religious terrorists set on punishing the followers of Jesus. And then that day, on the road to Damascus, a bright light created his graduation. The bright light struck him down, and he became a new person. And he was given instruction what to do, where to go, meet Ananias, get your assignment. And then he became a dedicated, well-disciplined, steadfast, faithful to the end preacher and writer, and one of the major authors of the New Testament. So what I wanted to show here was that when you become enlightened, when you become educated, that's when it's time for your assignment. So remember, I said I wanted you to remember something. So remember the burning bush, a light. Remember the 11 stars and sun and the moon. Those are lights. The blinding light on the road to Damascus was a light. All of these were, I interpret them as their enlightenment, their graduations, their turn from an old way to a new way because of their enlightenment. And we could go into that or in a message for another day, but I want to talk about what we can learn from these folks and what it is that we can apply to our lives as far as graduation, as far as gaining knowledge, as far as sharing that knowledge. So what I got out of this is when you are educated or when you learn something, you're responsible. You have a responsibility to share that, because what good is the knowledge if you keep it to yourself? None, absolutely none. And that's why too much is given, much is required, because you have to share that. You have a responsibility to share that. And so one of the things, I'm going to go through a few things that I think we should be looking for when we get a new set of information or a new reach a new educational milestone, whatever it may be. So the first thing is teaching. Like I said, you have to give back. So notice that each one of these was trained for a mission from God. Moses was trained in such a way that even though he felt like he didn't have the tongue or the mouth to be able to say what it is he needed to say, he still had the vision, he still had the teaching, and he was able to share that with his brother and with the others of those around him that were in place to carry out the vision. Paul was trained in all of the areas of the Pharisees, but he was able to use that when he began to become enlightened and share. And he knew where the pitfalls were. He knew where the holes were in the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because he was able to say, here's what Christ has done. Here's how Christ has fulfilled these laws. And here's where we have to take the next step. We as Hebrews, as Christians, are the next step. We are the graduated ones. So that's what Paul shared. And then with Joseph, he just taught all of his people how to be wise in times of famine. And so again, each one of these individuals has been given a gift, given enlightenment, and shared appropriately with all of those around him. And so one of the things that I would share with graduates and all the rest of us is that we teach appropriately with patience and compassion, because sometimes you can teach and you can shake your finger at people, and that's not necessarily the way to get things across. You have to teach with compassion. You have to understand that everybody's not in the same place that you are. Everybody learns differently. Everybody learns at a different pace. So I would share with you that just because you learned a little something doesn't mean you have to beat somebody over the head with it. And one thing that I want to bring up too also is that if you may have a certain set of information, but somebody else may have another set of information, and it may even be about the same thing. So I can't say, well, I know cars, and so I know everything there is to know about cars. Well, maybe I know how to drive a car, but maybe I don't know how to fix a car. So I can't browbeat the mechanic and say, well, you don't know what you're doing, when all I know how to do is drive the car. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So you can always share with people in such a way that, I can learn from you, you can learn from me, and we can work together to accomplish a goal. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, teaching. Also, you're going to lose patience. Sometimes people are, just hard-headed. Now, sometimes they're hard-headed because they just don't get it. Sometimes they're hard-headed because they're stubborn. I know more than you do, so you can't tell me. There's all sorts of reasons why. Or people are just distracted. Maybe they got things going on at home. Maybe they got other things to think about. But as a teacher, you just have to be compassionate. You have to be patient. And you have to know that people have different learning styles. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about communicating, because that's another key area when you have a responsibility. I'm going to skip that until later. So I'll talk about humility. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:9, he said that he was the least of the apostles. Now, never mind the fact that I wrote half the New Testament and I know this and I know that and I've studied under this, that, and the other. But no, he said, I'm the least of the apostles because I've persecuted the people of God. He knew his place. He knew that he wasn't all that in a bag of chips. He's just a piece in a huge I guess, a huge machine, so to speak. That is Christianity. That is the gospel. That is sharing the gospel. So we have to remember that we are not the only ones. There's nothing new under the sun. You can always learn something from somebody, because you can't claim that you know everything, right? And one of the things, I guess I call this humility, is you've got to strive to be right, but you don't have to strive to be perfect. And some people get bogged down in trying to be perfect, and everything is just so, and you end up with a kind of analysis paralysis kind of a situation where you can't do anything because you got to get just that last little piece right. And sometimes that's not necessary. Now, trust me, if you're my pilot, if you're my doctor, you're my bridge builder, I want you to get it right. But I'm just saying that in most things that we deal with, especially when we're dealing with others, we want to make sure that we're not just not doing anything because we're trying to be perfect, or we're what tends to happen is we'll pick on other people too. When we have a perfectionist issue, nobody's right. Everything's wrong. And what you're really mad at is yourself, because you want to get everything right. And so you think everybody else should have everything right. And that, again, is where you have to take in some humility and some patience and some understanding that you aren't all that. Yes, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes, we are a unique creature in Christ, but we're not the end all be all. Okay, so we don't know everything. So I want to share that. And I don't want to be browbeating anybody, like I told you before, but I'm just trying to say, let's open our minds, open our hearts, and be self-aware. Examine ourselves and how we come across and how we treat people in such a way that we can be open. Because sometimes you can think you know something and you get your face broke when you realize that you're wrong. So you want to make sure that that you're dealing in humility. I keep getting off track because some of these issues are, you know, they just can lead to stuff. But I'm gonna stay in my lane. So one thing you don't want to do also is you don't want to brag. Nobody wants to hear you brag about all that you've done, all that you've accomplished, all that you've been educated in. Let your actions speak for themselves. Because here's the deal. I've seen people go up to people in a setting and say, you know, they want to brag about their whole their new car, or their education, or this, that, and the other. And hold up a second. You could be talking to the owner of the dealership. Now you look awful stupid talking about how nice your little entry model car looks, and they own the dealership that probably sold you the car. You want to talk about how educated you are, and you're talking to a college professor. So tone down on the bragging, have a conversation, share what you share, stay in your lane, know what you know, but don't try to sound like you're all that. Because again, humility is key, because you can open yourself up to somebody and there's some real sharing that can go on. I have a person that I know right now that is trying to start a new business. And it's a business that I could probably help him in, but he talks so much that he won't shut up long enough for me to tell him how to succeed in that business. Every time I open my mouth to say, well, hey, you should, oh, because I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I got this figured out and I got that figured out. No, hold on, son, you're half my age. There's a couple things I could share with you, but I can't get a word in. So one day, maybe. But the point that I'm getting to is that you can always learn something from anybody. So listen, you know, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So let's use those. And while I'm on the subject of listening, how about I skip that for a second? I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that. And we already talked about self-management. Geez, I don't need notes. I just keep running past them. So let's see. So what am I going to do? I'm going to offer you a little bit of advice based on what I think we need to know as people that have graduated from whatever part of life that we've come from. One, be confident in your vision. Seek God's plan for your life. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you, and I will hold up your hand. Psalm 119:105, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. How better to gain confidence in your vision, to seek it from the one that gives you the vision, the gift, the motivation in the first place. All right. So just know that you can change the world no matter who you are, what you are. If God says so, you can change the world. Look at Bill Gates, look at Jeff Bezos, look at Martin Luther King, look at Barack Obama, look at Dolores Kendrick. You can look at all of these people and see how the world can be changed by just following God's vision for your life. But don't get cocky now. Don't get cocky. Like I said, there's always somebody that knows more than you. And the way down is much harder than the way back up. So be careful. The next thing is, don't turn a blind eye to your fellow man that's in need. Look at Joseph. He was all that and a bag of chips. And he could have just said, you know what? Wrong as y'all did me, you can starve. But he did not do that. He embraced them. He brought them in. He had compassion and forgiveness for them. Moses had compassion for the slave that was being bitten and risked everything in order to right that injustice. Paul, well, he just had compassion for everybody. And so he just wanted to make sure that, we all didn't go to hell. He wanted to make sure that we didn't have false teachers. He wanted to make sure that everyone heard the gospel of Jesus Christ and knew what to do with it. So the next thing is to prepare. We've all heard this term, stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? So my dad used to say, make it happen. And so I say, don't wait for things to happen to you. Make life happen. Don't let it happen to you. Now, that's not to say get out in front of what God's doing. What I'm saying is what we're celebrating today is getting an education, whether it's a formal education in a school or reading books, whether it's traveling, whether it's prayer. It's better to prepare and prevent than it is to repair and repent. So let's remember that there are ways to be prepared without getting out of God's will. Educate yourself, understand things around you, understand what's happening in your life. And don't think that just because you've got this degree or diploma that you're done. There's always something to learn. Kind of why we're here at church, right? We're here to learn continually and grow. So what was the next one? Okay, now it's time to talk about communication. Communication is not just speaking, but it's also listening. We're taught at work that communication is a two-way street, and that you have to be an active listener as well as an effective communicator. And active listening involves, like I said before, having 2 ears and 1 mouth. Don't be so quick to respond. Listen for comprehension. Listen to understand what the person is saying. And you don't have to dominate every conversation, because a lot of people will get tied up in, well, I got a better story than you have, or I'm sicker than you are, or my house is bigger than yours, or my woes are bigger than yours. How about you just stop and listen? And that's what I talked about a little while ago, is that maybe you could learn how to better understand business if you just listen to somebody that's been there. And you don't have to make the mistakes that other people have made. Just by listening, everybody has something to offer. I can't stress that enough. And then on the talking to people, or the communicating with people, you have to understand who it is that you're communicating with and what you're communicating about. You can't just talk about stuff you don't know what you're talking about, or you just make things worse. I mean, you wouldn't talk politics to a 2-year-old any more than you would talk, scientific theory with an astrophysicist, right? You stay where it is that where you're communicating, or where you're able to communicate. And what do I mean by that? You shouldn't take shortcuts. Back in the days, the early days of cell phone technology, when you had texting and email, and you had to abbreviate everything because you were paying. The more you typed or the more you texted, the more you had to pay. And so everybody abbreviated everything, and everything was shortened, and everything was slang. And so people got out of the habit of writing full sentences and writing full words out. And it got to a place where it started to enter our regular culture, that people just speak in slang and abbreviations and acronyms. And a lot of times people don't understand what you're talking about. So it's best to, like I said, meet people. Don't assume that people understand what you're talking about. And that's the responsibility of the speaker or the writer. And so I just wanted to throw that in there, that if you want to communicate effectively and clearly, you can't assume that people know what you're talking about. And I look at Moses and I'm thinking, he said, I'm thinking in my mind that he probably said to himself, you know what, I can speak the way I want to speak, but I don't think I can get that across to the pharaohs and to the entire tribe of Israel that I'm trying to lead, to all the people that I need to talk to. But I need somebody that's a spokesperson that I can say, here's what it is I want to say, and then let them be the better communicator. Because even then, that's smart, is to be able to say, you know what, I know my audience, and I know what they need to hear, and I know how they need to hear it. So I'm going to talk to them in such a way that they know what's happening. And I don't have to repeat myself. I don't have to have them try and figure out, okay, what did he say? I don't understand what he was talking about. So one of the things that I also want to highlight is email. Talk about email and how people are having trouble with that sometimes. And it reminds me of a story. I was at Microsoft, and Microsoft is all computers. Nobody uses the phone at all. And so somebody had sent me a question. I didn't understand or a statement. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I called my boss in the office. I said, do you know what they're talking about? And we sat there about 5 or 10 minutes trying to figure out what this email was saying. And so me coming from the telecom industry, I said, well, what if we call them on the phone? And my boss said, well, that's crazy talk. picked up the phone, called the guy, answered the question in 2 seconds. And what I'm saying is that because the email was so cryptically written only for the person that wrote it, rather than for the person that was receiving it, we were left trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So what that tells me is that we have to be very careful that sometimes we don't write the way we talk. And this is for the youngsters out there that always are using the email. Is an email, and I will say, I'm not just talking out of my head. I mentor student interns at work, and I've done it for years. And one of the things that I teach them is business communication. And one of the things that we share is that when you're writing an email, subject line says what you're talking about. The first line or two explains why you're writing them. The next line or two says, here's what I want you to do, so that you're always making sure that they have some action to carry out. Whether I need you to go do something, I need you to figure this out, or I just need you to know this information. And so that way we can communicate effectively. And I think a lot of this is learned from that early experience where we didn't know what the heck the person was trying to say. And so to eliminate that and to communicate effectively, and this goes for anybody, just be clear and understand who your audience is, what it is they might hear, and what it is they might interpret. So I've been on that for way too long. So I talked about making mistakes. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Even the mistakes can be learning experiences. So let's make sure that we don't beat ourselves up about making mistakes. Now, you don't necessarily have to make mistakes. You can minimize those mistakes. And again, that's by listening. How can you listen? Who do you listen to? Well, you can listen to your elders. You can listen to the pastor. You can listen to apostles, or you can do it yourself and go to the Bible. I mean, there's a ton of wisdom. If you just read Proverbs, Psalms, and Ecclesiastes, that would elevate your wisdom level considerably, because it's just a lot of good common sense wisdom. And then as you read those and begin to study those, and you can begin to ask your leadership, how can I apply this in my life so that I can be better? I think that's what can really make us grow. I used to be of a mindset when I was younger that I can do it. I'll show them that I don't need any help, and mess everything up. Or not, at least not be as far along as I could have been had I just listened. Had I had enough humility to listen and say, you know what, I don't really know how to do this. I think I can figure it out, but it'd be best to get some guidance. So that's what I'm saying to you all, is just don't be afraid of mistakes. You know you can make mistakes, but you can definitely avoid them. And if you listen to those leaders or your parents or whoever that know you better than anybody, they're going to tell you even what your weaknesses are, those hidden places in your life and in your mind where you think, well, nobody knows this about me. You think you hid it. Nobody knows this weakness about me. You think you hid it. Nobody knows this habit I have. You think they don't. But those are the things that can help, because with compassion, your leadership, the ones that know you and love you, can share with you how to overcome whatever it is that you're doing without hurting you. Because the world will hurt you in a heartbeat. They'll tell you about yourself up one way and down the other and won't think anything of it. So trust that your leadership knows you and knows what's best for you. Okay. The next item is be dependable. Now, this is pretty simple, I think. Honor your word. Say what you mean what you say. Timeliness. Be on time. Have respect for others, because again, all of this has to do with how you treat others. If you're late to something, sure, you may miss a plane or you may miss the bus or whatever it is. But if you're late to something where other people are depending on you, now you've messed up a whole bunch of other people's lives, and now you're just selfish. Suppose everybody's going on a trip and everybody's meeting up to go in one car. Now, nobody can go until you get there. Suppose you're having a dinner party. Nobody can eat until you get there. It's those kinds of things that it's just something that we need to work on. We need to see in ourselves, and we need to be dependable on. Pay your bills on time. Write things down. Don't promise what you can't or won't deliver. And here's the thing. People confuse reasons for excuses, or excuses for reasons. Oh, well, I had this going on, or I had there was an accident, or I had to go stop at the store, or I had to do this, or I had to do that. You may think it's a reason. Anybody hearing it is just an excuse. You might as well keep it to yourself, because it's just an excuse. It doesn't change the fact if you had too many red lights, or you had to stop and get gas. That doesn't change the fact that we're sitting here with food getting cold. So you need to plan ahead and be respectful of others so that you can meet your obligations. Why is it important to be dependable? Because if you're going to lead others, they have to be able to believe what you say. They have to be able to believe that I can count on you to give me good advice, to give me good direction, to lead me into a place where I can feel comfortable. But if they can't depend on you to just keep your word, oh yeah, I'll bring you by dinner tomorrow. And I'm sitting there, well, I don't have to take anything out of the freezer. I don't have to go to the store, because so-and-so is going to bring me dinner. And you forget, or you don't, or you are late. I'm sitting there hungry. And now I got to scramble and try and figure out how to get my dinner. And these are just examples, but I'm just showing you how carelessness or lack of dedication to being dependable can affect others. It's not just you. Oh, I'm always late. Well, no, that's not good enough. You fool around, miss your job, miss a plane, who knows what all. So I'm just saying that. Be dependable. I can't stress it enough. And if you feel like you have a habit of doing that, ask God to help you to review your day. At the end of the day, just say, Lord, what was I supposed to do? What did I say offhandedly that maybe I forgot? And now I have to go back and clean up. Now, sure, there's things that happen. Sure, you could get a flat tire. Sure, you could be stuck behind a train or something. But now we all have cell phones. You can call somebody and say, hey, look, I'm going to be late. Or, hey, look, I'm on my way, but I'm going to be late. But don't make that a habit either. Because again, that's not going to change the result. If there's people waiting around for you, the work still has to get done. So let's be mindful of that. All right. The last thing I was going to talk about was never give up. This is a huge trait. Never give up. What was Moses, about 80 something when he started leading the people out of Egypt? Proverbs 24:16 says, for though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. Psalm 37:24, though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. There is always, God is always with you. As long as you are striving towards his plan for you, and you're using the gifts that he gave you, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. So that's what I have to say about all of us that really need to examine ourselves and say, okay, what can I do with my life? I just want you to remember this. Leaders replicate themselves and give back as teachers. And last but not least, leaders give credit, not take credit. So I've got a bunch more, but my mouth is getting dry. So, and they say you got to leave them always wanting something else. So maybe I can speak again another day, but I think that that's enough. Well, maybe not, since my wife thinks that's hilarious. But I think the point is clear, is that as we see the men of God carry out their vision, we can see the leadership qualities that they had within them. We can see that they were communicators. We see that they never gave up. We see that they were humble. We see that they listened as well as communicated effectively to get their points across. I mean, good grief, look at Paul. I mean, we're talking about a communicator, right? So I think we can, if we just look at those three, take the tips that I gave you and start applying them to our lives, I think we can increase our service immensely, not only to God, but to this house. Because as we become more dependable, as we become more pliable and listen more, we can do more for the house of God. And I think that that's what God has called me to share with you today. So, bye, y'all.